Okay, so thank you for joining. We're here for an emotional health check-in and three presentations to talk about helping kids cope with changes in schedule, online schooling and uncertainty, and discussion of anxiety and approaches to self-care in times of distress, and Shalom Bayit, domestic tranquility tips for couples. So we're going to start with Stuart, who will share some tips for helping kids cope with changes in schedule. Just again, a note that there are three documents that I put in the chat that people may want to just open at your own leisure. We'll just open them up before we're done so you could save them, because once we end the chat, they won't be there anymore. Once we end this conversation, they won't be there anymore. Okay, so Stuart, why don't you start? And thank you, Stuart, for joining us.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Rabbi. Hi, everybody. So throughout this presentation, I want everybody to remember that all children are different and suggestions might work for some kids and not for others, which is why I'm in the profession, because everybody's different. You know, and the same applies for adults. You know, there's some people I can ask, how did that make you feel? And they respond, and there's other people I go and ask, how did that make you feel? And they might say, that's the dumbest question I've ever heard in my life. So that being said, our kids are different. You know, some kids even, like, I'm sure everyone's heard a lot about schedules, the importance of schedules, the importance of routines. Some kids need schedules and other people don't. Some kids might need like a visual schedule, like the smaller kids, what's going on throughout the day. And other kids, they might just need something written down, and other kids, they need to do their own thing. So it's important, of course, is that, you know your kid, of course. You know, also in terms of anxiety, some kids like drawing when they feel anxious. I find that that's very useful with 90% of the kids that I work with, except for the 10% who feel bad about their drawings. So of course, the importance of working on a schedule. Routines have to be specific, and they need to be specific. Not just we're going to go ahead and watch TV at 4. It's you know, with some kids it's going to be helpful to be very specific. At 9 o'clock, we're going to wake up. At 9:15, we're going to clean up the room. At 9:45, we're going to start our math work. At 10:30, and you know, that way when it's more specific, I think people will find it much easier. So what's also very helpful is that if you create your schedule with your child, if you sit down together and say, what do you think we're going to do during the day? What do you think is going to work? Again, some kids can do that and other kids, of course, can't. So that's going to depend. But I think for any age, you know, that is a good way to start also problem solving. You know, create schedules. What can you both agree on? Write down TV times. And, you know, it's the beginning of like teaching problem solving. You know, what can we do together? You know, there's 2 lines that I really like a lot that I use with kids I work with, my own kids, myself. And in terms of problem solving, if a child says, oh, I'm going to go ahead and do this. And then what I usually ask is, well, what do you think will happen if you do this? So that's like the beginning of getting the child into problem solving. Again, it depends, you know, where your child is going to be. You know, if you do this, what's going to be the consequence? Favorite psychology lines. What is the consequence? And then we also have, you know, if you want to gauge like a child with feelings, you can say, you know, how do you think you'll make that person feel if you say that and if you do that? And again, you know, different kids need to understand that adults, that kids, they can, you know, have different needs in how they're dealing with the coronavirus. And I think the same applies as well, you know, to us adults. You know, one adult might be more concerned, it might be cleaning more than the other, another one's less concerned, but it's a question of understanding, of course, that, you know, we think differently. And for kids to understand that, that's very hard, especially for the younger ones, because developmentally they're not yet at that level. So the other thing I wanted to share with, I know, you know, teens, you got to set short-term and long-term goals up. You know, when are they most productive? From what I understand, Barron's changed since last week. Last week was office hours, a little bit, less informal. And this week it's been, you're pretty much face to face during the day. So when you start your work, it's like, if you're better in math and you feel more awake, you work on the math. And if you can take breaks, that would be a good time too. And find a time, I'm going to be done at this time, and that's going to be it. In terms of social media, I would say enjoy it. Over the years, people have said, "Oh my gosh, what has social media done to us?" I can tell you, I've been WhatsApping my grandson every day. Would it be possible during the year? Every single day we WhatsApp. He's adorable, cute, handsome, just like me. I've been speaking to friends I haven't spoken to in a long time. So for teenagers, of course, but of course it's got to be, you can do it from this amount of time, and then then you got to start. So, in terms of kids' uncertainty, it's really knowing what to expect. All right. The problem for us, even as adults are right now, we don't know what to expect to a certain extent. So in terms of, again, I've got to go back to the schedule. In terms of, making a schedule, this is what's going to happen. Mom, Dad, why are we doing this? The explanation, of course, depends on the age of the child. We are doing this because, we want to keep everybody healthy, and Mommy and Daddy are working hard to do that. Of course, teenagers might be a little bit different. Exercising helps everybody. Drawing pictures, journals, I think helps others. And some, I can tell you, I've read some psychologists for adults recommending journals at this time. And pretty much my journal was Sunday home, Monday home, Tuesday home. So, but some people do, I think, enjoy doing that. I sent out, there's also going to be a link how to help people with certain behaviors in terms of how kids are, how they're acting, and how you can work on that. I didn't want to go into that as much today, but there are some good recommendations in some of those handouts that I gave out. And finally, two things, when it comes to our kids, there's a saying by a doctor who wrote the book, The Explosive Child, and that is, children do well if they can. So if they can't, there's other issues going on. Maybe less flexible, maybe they're more easily frustrated, maybe there's neurological issues as well. But, and right now there's so many sociological issues that are happening at home. So, try to keep that in mind when you're dealing with the kids, that there's so much, and children do the best that they can. And also please refer to those, the handouts that I sent. One's just an outline, but the other one is, behavior recommendations and how you can help your kids. Okay. I lost you.
Thank you. Oh. Thank you. I will keep these links up here for the duration. And when I send out the recording to the shul, and when I post it on Facebook, etc., I will include those links as well. Okay, we're going to move on to Bella Morgan, who is going to share with us tips for dealing with anxiety and approaches to self-care in times of distress.
All right, so first, thank you, Rabbi, for inviting me. And I should say that since I'm in my official capacity, I'm actually Bella Shanzer right now.
Okay.
I practice as Dr. Shanzer. This is one of the ways that I practice self-care. I try to create very firm boundaries for myself between my professional life and my personal life. So I'm Mrs. Morgan, my children's mom and my husband's wife, but I practice as Dr. Shanzer. So even for myself, I find it very helpful. And I think that's a good segue into what we're going to talk about for the next few minutes on how to manage anxiety and what I'm calling uneasy times. The first thing, it's really important to remember that it's okay to feel anxious. I think we tend to judge ourselves when we are anxious or when we're sad. Anxiety in and of itself is not a bad emotion. First of all, no emotion is bad. And anxiety is very protective. It developed very organically as a way to protect us as animals when we were being attacked. If you don't develop fear when you're being attacked, you're not going to run away or you're not going to fight. So that whole fight or flight response is one of the most self-protective developmentally responses we have. The issue is when the anxiety starts taking over and all you do is worry. And I think that's really important for people to remember that the issue is when the worry impacts your functioning. It's okay to, and quite frankly, if you weren't a little worried about the coronavirus, there might be something else wrong with you. So I think acknowledging that this is uneasy times and that we are allowed to be anxious is really important. again, the issue is how anxious are you becoming, and where is that line between appropriate anxiety and maladaptive anxiety? So in terms of that, I want you to think of a few different categories that you can use to help manage your anxiety, and then how to measure, how to get a sense of when am I too anxious. So first, and Stuart, thank you. You gave me a lot of throws. A lot of things that Stuart mentioned are the same in children as adults. Really, we're all just big children. That's the honest truth. In terms of our response to things, we may do a better job of hiding it, but we have essentially it's a lot of the same responses to things as we did when we were children, and things that help us as children also help us as adults. And to that note, self-care is the most critical thing that you can do in times like this. First of all, you can't help anybody else if you're feeling overwhelmed yourself. And the only way to help yourself is to take care of yourself, hence self-care. So what I'm going to tell you are not things that necessarily are so scientifically like mind-blowing, but they're really, really important in terms of making sure that you are caring for yourself. The first is to maintain a normal sleep schedule. I put that first because it's number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in terms of helping yourself in this kind of situation. Unfortunately, when you're confined to your home, and Sophie Lee, my sincere sympathies that you have been stuck in your apartment for the last 9 days, I think you said. Because when we're sitting around in our house, we oftentimes just never change. We wear our pajamas all day. It's sometimes hard to get ourselves to go to sleep. It's also sometimes hard to wake up because you don't necessarily need to leave for work at any given time. The kids don't need to be woken up for school. The things that we do normally to get us onto a regular routine are not in place. And so the tendency is then to stay up late, watch TV, watch the news. Bad idea. I would limit news watching, quite frankly. And most importantly, maintain a normal sleep schedule. This will help you in terms of your overall mood and anxiety state. I can't stress that enough. Second, get outside. Sophie Lee, you got to get out of your apartment, even for an hour a day. I don't care if you just sit in your backyard, sit on your terrace, however you can access the sun. Sunshine and vitamin D are really, really important for your mood. And we are particularly lucky that here in Houston right now, it is good weather. It is nice out. It is not raining. I mean, I have a lot more sympathy for the folks up north in addition to the issues that they're struggling with. It's been snowing up there. It's cold. We have the luxury of having beautiful 70 and 80 degree weather. I think it almost hit 90 yesterday. Go outside. Get outside every day, even for a little bit. Sunshine is important. Exercise, and Stuart mentioned this. Walk around the block, walk up and down your street. Again, you have to keep moving. These are things that are just important in terms of self-care and making sure that you are able to maintain a good internal balance. Healthy eating. Again, our tendency when we're cooped up in our home, especially before Pesach, and we think it's a mitzvah to finish all the chametz in our pantry, is to eat junk. Don't eat junk. Try to really maintain your normal eating habits, your healthy eating habits. These things are really, really important. I know they sound a little hokey, but they're really, really important in terms of maintaining your sense of self. And finally, if you can, find a quiet place to at least once a day go by yourself. I know that for some of us who have children at home, and all of a sudden we're all home together. I mean, I am one of 6 people in my family. We are all home together all day, 24/7. It is a zoo. But even with that, it is important to find a place where you can go just for a few minutes and feel that your brain has a chance to have some quiet. So those are just some overall self-care techniques that quite frankly are important anytime in your life, but especially if you're feeling overwhelmed with anxiety, it's really, really important. Okay, let's now shift to the next level, which is actually interventions to help you relax. So these are relaxation techniques. These are a whole bunch. I'm just going to touch on them. I'm happy if anybody wants me to go over any one of these in more depth, just feel free to email me or text me, WhatsApp me offline. But essentially, these are various techniques that you can do by yourself in your home that can really, really help decrease your basal level of anxiety, at least the physical sensation of anxiety that you may be feeling. The first is mindful meditation or prayer. And, as Jews, we have the luxury of being offered 3 times a day to really stop and let our minds refocus. And I can't stress how important taking advantage of that is. And if you don't have time to do it 3 times a day, if you don't have time to do it for 15 minutes a day, do it for a minute. Literally, if you can get to a minute of mindful meditation, my hat's off to you. It's really, really difficult actually, but really, really helpful. Start with really just focusing down. And again, happy to talk to anybody who wants more details on how to do this offline, but I highly, highly recommend it. And really, tefillah, prayer, kavana, that's all mindful meditation. I know in psychology, we throw around terms like mindful meditation and mindfulness in general, but that's really what tefillah is. Second, deep breathing exercises. Really, really important and really, really helpful. And anybody can do this. One of the few things we can control in terms of our reflex responses is our breathing rate. We actually can't control our heart rate. We can only control our breathing. But by slowing down our breathing, we can slow down our heart rate. And we essentially then send a message to our brain to not be worried. It's part of the reflex response, but as we start feeling more worried, our heart rate goes up to get more blood to our extremities so that we can get ready to fight or flight. And essentially by slowing down our breathing and then by reflexively slowing down our heart rate, our brain starts to realize, we're not in danger anymore. I don't have to be so worried. I personally do deep breathing with my eyes closed. I think it works better that way. It reduces any time of extra stimulation that you might be getting visually. If it makes you uncomfortable to close your eyes, feel free to do it with your eyes open. Essentially, it's really just going like this. Very slowly and doing it over and over again. And actually, if you do it right now, and you can all feel free to do it while I'm speaking, your body actually feels more relaxed for the few seconds that you're engaging in that deep breathing. And if you're starting to feel really overwhelmed, sit down and do some deep breathing. It really does help. The next thing is something called visual imagery. Again, this is all connected. The deep breathing, the mindful meditation, the visual imagery, it's all connected, and it all helps in terms of reducing your sort of the increased level of valence that you have. Your brain is kind of looking all over the place because it's so worried, and that's why you have this sense that your mind is racing. The visual imagery, again, helps you focus so that you can go through the mindful, so that you become more mindful, more meditative. It allows you to focus in on an image that you really train your brain to kind of talk through. Again, happy to work with anybody offline if they're interested. And then the last is something called muscle contraction and release exercises. Again, this is similar to deep breathing. It's very easy to do. You can do it just sitting down at your desk. Essentially, you contract one muscle group at a time and then release it. So for example, your hand, contract your hand and then slowly release your hand. You'll see, your muscles will actually start feeling more relaxed. Again, the idea being that your physical body and your mind are all connected, and that if you can relax your physical body, your mind will start feeling more relaxed. Those are just some very easy, I consider them like DIY relaxation techniques. Then let's talk about more formal treatment. So I want to just take a moment here, and I don't think that anybody on this call abuses alcohol, but in case you started to think that maybe this would be the time to start, I caution anybody who's feeling really anxious not to drink. It is a real temptation to use alcohol to help make us feel better. That is not an adaptive or healthy use of alcohol. I can't stress that enough. I know, I'm sure if you all are like me, I've been like inundated with memes from the internet. I mean, my WhatsApp, I get 50 million a day, half of them making some reference to alcohol. And while they're funny to laugh at, in reality, alcohol is really not a good thing to use, especially when you're feeling really anxious. Yes, it technically makes you feel better because the alcohol sits in the receptors in your brain that lead to decreased brainwave activity. But long term, to get dependent on alcohol and to what I consider self-medicate with alcohol is really a bad idea. It's really a slippery slope. So that's just an aside in terms of that. If you are feeling really, really anxious and you really feel that the anxiety has sort of taken over your life, and this is again that line between appropriate worrying and maladaptive worrying, where you can't sleep, you're having trouble eating, you're nauseous, you're becoming more impatient, you're finding that you're more irritable than normal, your mood has really been negatively impacted to the degree that you don't feel happy, etc., as it starts getting further along that line, at that point, you do need to start thinking about treatment. To start with, I would say anybody who has a smartphone can access apps that help with, that can sort of lead you through cognitive behavioral therapy techniques, breathing exercises, some of the stuff I mentioned, but a little bit more formally. Again, there are tons out there. Happy to talk to you about which ones I think are better or worse. A lot of them have to do with whether or not you want to pay, you want it for free. I would say that you should also touch base with your health insurances. A lot of health insurance companies at this point have programs for their beneficiaries to take advantage of mental health-based apps that are out there in the internet world. And some of them are actually really, really good. Some of them are done by really highly trained professionals and are really, really helpful. Finally, though, if you've done all of the above, you've tried some of the cognitive behavioral therapy apps, you've tried some of the things, if you're still feeling that the anxiety has overwhelmed you, at that point, you really do need to speak to somebody. And I would say, don't wait. The issue with anxiety is that as it worsens, it becomes more intractable. And while believe in psychiatry that most things can be treated, the longer something goes on, the longer it takes to treat it, right? Something that you've been struggling with for days and days and weeks and weeks and months is not going to go away overnight. It's something that really, so the sooner you speak to somebody, the quicker you will start feeling better. And ultimately that's the most important thing. Again, circling back to the first statement, is you have to take care of you so that you can help everybody else in your family circle or in your community circle stay well throughout this next few weeks. Hopefully will end soon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Bella. I posted your review of what you said in the chat. So anyone, you're welcome to download that. Okay, and finally, we have Esther Frogel with us today, who's going to address tips for couples who may be experiencing challenging times with being together for so many hours in the same house, which is unusual. And so thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here and in cyberspace talking to you guys. Yeah, this is a really interesting time. So I try to think of some things both from my work and then also from my life right now, because I'm in this situation, and just kind of thinking through what's working, what's really not working. And so these are just some ideas. And so I sent you that link to.
You want me to share that on the screen?
Sure, that would be great. You don't need to look at my face.
I don't remember her name.
Okay. All right, here
Okay, so 10 tips to managing relationships during this time. Okay, first of all, give your spouse some space. That means, at least once a day, get away from each other. I know you're trying, some of you live in apartments, that's really hard. If it means it could be 5 minutes, it could be 10 minutes, it could be whatever you have to give, you need to give each other physical space. Sometimes that's not even possible. So headphones are really good. They kind of create a physical space. And know when the person is choosing to take that time, it's not an insult or a slap in the face. If you take it that way, it becomes that. So, I would say a big part is to kind of really allow for that space to happen at least once a day for each person. There is some funny moments that happen when you take space and then the spouse is sort of can build resentment about that. Just a personal example, I had to drop something off at someone's house and it took a little longer than, it should take. It takes about 3 minutes to get to their house, but I really enjoyed the space and the drive, and I didn't really give my husband a heads up about it. And then he was sort of like, wow, that took a really long time, Now, obviously, it was all in jest and it was okay, but that kind of stuff can build up. And so being able to say like, oh yeah, I really needed that. And then, them being understanding of that is really important. So if you can have in mind that when they're taking it, it's good. And when you want to take it, it's okay. And you're allowed to. It makes everything stronger and better. This works for extroverts too. It's not just introverts that need alone time. Okay, so the second thing is only make short-term plans. At this time, we don't really know what's going on. Nobody knows the full picture. We can get information here and there. There's tons online. I would say that, you know, really working on doing things one day at a time, just planning one day at a time with each other, not making these big plans like, how are we going to manage in 3 weeks? How are we going to manage in a month if this keeps going on? What will be after Pesach? I would say no post-Pesach talk. Like just one day at a time, you know, set maybe a time during the day where you could sit together and brainstorm the plans, just really logistic plans like, okay, how are we going to manage the kids' school? If you're both working or one of you's working, your work schedules, like you will have to kind of balance that out. If there's medical needs or groceries, who's going to be doing it, how it's going to work. These don't have to be super long conversations. I would say really short-term practical meetings that are allotted to a specific time, because what can happen is kids are trying to do schoolwork and you get a work call and your spouse is like also trying to do something and you're not on the same page about it. And then it becomes kind of like this, well, who's doing what, you know, kind of like what's going on here, and can create some challenges in that regard. So I would say really working on, you know, creating some kind of plan together daily. And also just knowing that the situation is changing every day. One day we're allowed play dates, the next day we're not. So really reassessing daily as the situation changes. That being said, I like that idea of doing that daily, but at the same time, there's a separate daily thing, which is implementing daily emotional check-ins. And all this is it's your job to ask your spouse, you know, how are they feeling today? And your job is to work hard on validating what they're feeling, even if it's not what you're feeling. For example, let's say you are married to someone who has pretty high anxiety in general, and here is a great opportunity, as we just heard, about how anxiety can be even raised during this time. So, you know, being able to validate that and not be triggered by that, and sort of allowing a person to just feel what they feel. This could be 5 minutes each. You could even set a timer for this check-in so that it doesn't go too long. It doesn't get too overwhelming, but it's okay. 5 minutes for me, 5 minutes for you. We get to express ourselves and we move on. The next one is kind of tricky. Agree to disagree, number 4. This is hard because there's a lot, like I said, a lot of information out there. There's so many articles, there's so many political opinions, there's religious opinions, there's Mashiach opinions, there's everything out there right now. And that's all great. It's all interesting. Also opinions about health and what we're supposed to do and what we're not supposed to do, and how do we socially distance, and what is really at risk. Am I at risk? Do I know people at risk? Am I going to infect people or not? There's so much out there. And we're not going to agree on every point. And what I'm finding as I talk to people is that the number one thing that they're struggling with is that they don't agree. One person wants to go for a walk, the other person isn't comfortable with them going for a walk, you know, or one person might be concerned about certain things going on in the economy, the other one isn't concerned. Like there's a lot there. So being able to just say, okay, this isn't the time where we're going to really get into the nitty gritty of what's right and what's wrong here. You know, being able to hear each other out and be flexible to allow the other person to express their needs, and also be humble enough to know that we don't really know anything. So no matter what you're arguing about, you don't really know. It's just an opinion. It's just a strong feeling. So really easing that up. Is this all right? Going too fast? Let me know if it's okay. Okay, number 5, and this one's my favorite. No Corona talk in the bedroom. That's like really big. You know, your bedroom is a sacred place in your marriage. A lot goes on there, and you don't want to consecrate it by bringing in added stress. That's not necessarily going to help you in other aspects of your marriage, not just in terms of intimacy, but also that time when you kind of unwind and just relax. Bringing this in is really hard. Now, I am putting a caveat here because I know that some people don't have a lot of space. They might live in a 2-bedroom apartment, or, you know, need a quiet place to talk when the kids aren't around. So I would change that and say, if you really need to talk about it, if you really need to have a conversation about what's going on in the world, and the only place for that is the bedroom. Because it's important to talk about it. Just the bedroom, I'd say, is somewhere where I don't love for that to happen. But if that's the only place you have, then designate it. You know, like it's only at this.
No, the host muted you.
Oh, I'm unmuted now. Okay, can you hear me? I can't hear you. Okay, I'm going to keep talking because that seems like I'm unmuted. So yeah, so if you don't have the space, you can do it in the bedroom. Just try to separate it from right before bed, right before you're unwinding, and you know, maybe just limit it and designate it. Okay, number 6 is kind of fun. Going back to old comforts. Remember 3 weeks ago when you were just living life? And it was before Purim, and everybody was happy, preparing their salchmanos. It was all nice. And you guys had your usual weekly routine where you might, I don't know, Netflix and chill, or read something together, or play a game, or just talk about how your day was. So talking about how your day was is a little complicated, but there's still elements of your day that are interesting and unique and not about this situation. There's still TV shows that you love, the good old ones that always made you laugh, different things that are your thing, the thing that you did as a couple all the time. This is the time to go back to that. You know, what do you love to do together? What brings you together? It could be painting. It could be just going for a walk, even is fine if you're able to. But go back to those things. Try to implement them in your life. Put them back in there because they're so valuable. And they really just make you feel normal again. Feel like you're just the way you are, you know? Number 7 is similar to alone time, but this is more about, I would say, especially with kids around in the house, it's a lot, you know, work, kids, being, you know, right now I'm a 2nd grade Rebbe and a pre-K Mora and a nanny and a psychologist and a wife. There's a lot going on. So being able to realize, like, kind of take the temperature of where your spouse is in that moment and sort of say, I can tell that you're struggling, and so jump in when that happens. Like, give them a break. Everyone has a breaking point throughout the day. At a certain point, it's me. At a certain point, it's my husband. At a certain point, it's one of my kids. Realize that, take their temperature, and try to be helpful if you can. A lot of these tips are about coming outside of yourself and being selfless for the other person in that moment, just so that they can then take the same note and try to do that for you. Okay, the next one, and I'm gonna kind of, I don't want to take too long, but speaking your partner's language. So this is where I wanted to discuss love languages. So I don't know if everybody knows about love languages, and I'm happy to send kind of some information about that. But you know, there's a book called The 5 Love Languages that talks about different ways in which people experience love and like to receive and to give love. One is gift giving. One might be words of affirmation, which is telling someone that you really appreciate them and things that they do. I love yous. One is quality time. One is, what's the other one off my top of my head right now? I said words of affirmation, love, gift giving, acts of service, and so acts of service and quality time. So these are all different things that you could do for someone, and knowing where your partner is in terms of their love language is really important. So just because you feel like if your love language might be, okay, I want someone to do something for me, an act of service, like cleaning up an area for them, or helping with making a meal for the kids, that may not be what they need. They might just need a hug. They might need some physical touch, or they might need, it would be so nice if you thought of them and bought them like a Diet Coke or something. So just being aware of your spouse and what it is that really makes them happy, and that's something that could really just bring that spark back, especially during stressful times. Number 9, that all of this being said, it's a hard time. You know, you may have had some issues even before this started, and now you have stress added on top of your marital issues. Seek help when you need it. You know, that means talk to a friend, talk to a family member, talk to a rabbi, counselor if you need that. You know, these things are really hard on anyone. So on top of that, you know, it's worth it to get help when it's needed. And don't see it as a sign of weakness, but rather strength. I always really impress that upon people. Asking for help just means that you're strong enough to know that you need it and that you're not ashamed to work. So it's really a strong point. And then lastly, everything I said until now, you could forget it all because you know yourself better than anyone and you know your relationships. So do what works, meaning you might have things that when you've had stressful times in your relationships you've done that you might be forgetting about now. Try to think back to those times and try it again. You might have more tools than you expect. Like really trust yourself in that concept of, you know, you have a lot, you've done a lot, you've lived, especially if you've been in marriages for a long time, you know each other well. And even though this is a hard time, you've been through things together and you could work through it again. This is something, even though we're separate, we are in this together, and trust yourself. That's what I got.
Okay, thank you so much. I want to once again thank Stuart and Bella and Esther for joining us tonight for this emotional well-being check-in. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. And to all those, I guess I'll unmute everyone. Maybe we'll take one or two questions if anyone wants to ask a question. And if not, we'll say goodnight. And I will post this for people to be able to take advantage of. So I'm going to unmute everybody now. Does anybody have a question? Who's that?
I'm Sophie Lee.
Okay, please.
New York City is very, very scary right now, and they're literally telling people to not leave. So how am I supposed to get outside and like go for walks and do this when they're literally saying don't leave your apartment? Like, how am I supposed to do that when I feel like I'm stuck?
So Sophie Lee, are you in New York right now?
Yes.
So that's, sorry. So first I thought you were in Houston. So, but yes, New York is feeling very scary. It's definitely higher rates of viral load there. I mean, everything, yes. That said, I still think, and you can read, I mean, you have to read the specific regulations that they're giving out in New York City. I still think that you can go downstairs and take a walk around the block. Okay, the issue is, you know, obviously significant social isolation, shelter in place, not being with more than 10 people at any given time, and being 6 feet away from whoever. But I think you can, again, I don't want to get in trouble with Andrew Cuomo. I think he's doing a great job. So I don't want to speak blithely about this, but I still believe that you can go downstairs and go outside of your apartment for a few minutes and take a walk around the block. I mean, let's say you had a dog, you'd have to, right? And a lot of New Yorkers have pets, and they haven't told people that they can't take their pets out for a walk. So I would say take yourself and go take a walk outside once a day. Really, really important.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
I do. This is Suzanne. It's actually kind of a merge between Bella and Stuart. But Bella, you talked about the importance of having alone time. And then I'm thinking about how, you have any suggestion on how to really teach that to children who also need that alone time, that are like, you know, kind of, but don't know the words or the ways, and you can't, like, I know for me, every time I try to separate my children, they're like, no, but they're, you know, they're fighting, they're struggling, and they really need the alone time. And so I'd be curious about just any suggestions on how to help young children be able to navigate that, or even knowing how to talk to each other, you know, I don't know, but.
I hate to say that I can't say that it gets much easier as they become teenagers.
No.
I'll let Stuart take the first pass at this, because I was gonna, you know, I think part of it is just parent, depending on the age of the child, actually taking them and say, okay, we're gonna each go into our own little personal timeout. I don't like to use the word timeout unless, because generally speaking, children interpret that as a negative. But if there's a way to use a term that you all have.
Thinking space. Thinking space.
I like that. So something
you.
like that, and you give them something to do that's just them and you, or just them, that can help.
You know, also in terms of thinking space, you know, also a lot of parents have issues with they're on the phone and their kid doesn't stop bothering them. So pretty much, I mean, whatever your kid likes doing, you know, if you can stay, we're all going to stay in our area at this amount of time. I mean, the bottom line is though, we're still going to have moments where our, you know, where our kids just, oh my God, and you can't set that time, right? You can't schedule that time because with our kids, it just happens. So, you know, it's a question of even rewarding them. We're going to take a few minutes here, you go there, and you can say, why do you think he looks that way, depending on the age of your kid? I'm sorry, I know I keep coming back to that, but with kids, it's so true because developmentally where they're at. But I don't know, what does your kid like getting? What does he like doing? Does he like stickers? Come on, we're going to stay alone for 5-10 minutes, and then after that, we'll get together again. But let's have some me time. You know, there's so many articles right there right now. It's like, oh my gosh, from so many different organizations. But the most interesting one I saw, I decided this person definitely did not have kids because he starts saying, get used to the solitude. And I'm like, oh my God, I know parents that would love to have that solitude. So yes, it is tricky. So I don't know, is that helpful? If you need something else, you can email me, but look at those forms I sent you, okay?
Great, thank you.
It deals with that behavior stuff, and you know, you're welcome to call me or email me. Was that helpful? Is there anything else you're looking for?
No, I don't know, just ideas. Yeah, I mean, you know, for me personally, I have young twins, like they share a room, they like, you know, life is together constantly.
Yes, constantly.
So, you know, and even when they want their time apart, they're also, you know, best friends and share, you know, like, so they don't know how to sort of like, you can see, and the blow-ups happen and their blow-ups, and then my stress because I can't work because they're blowing up because,
Sure.
you know, so yeah, just kind of trying to think of some creative ways to help them, you know, separate and get the space that they need for each other.
Yeah, I would really underscore the reward system. You know, some people might call it bribery. I'll call it positive reinforcement. I think whatever works, especially in this kind of situation, is really important. And especially if you need to get work done, make it a contest. Children oftentimes, and obviously this depends on the child, but if your children like to do well, that's always a good way to incentivize behavior by doing something like, okay, we're going to make a little star chart and let's see how, you know, how many stars you can get. Or if everybody stays quiet for 5 minutes reading their book or coloring, you know, we'll get X, you'll get an extra scoop of ice cream, whatever it is. At this age, behavioral interventions are really, really helpful. And when you're in a situation where you really need to get a certain behavior accomplished, use the reward system. It really does work.
And that's what's in that form. And it's not bribery, because when we bribe, we want somebody to do something illegal for us. That's one thing, all right? And another way to look at it is our children, not to sound sorry, Bella, not to get too biological, but our children, their prefrontal lobe, which is involved in decision-making, you know, that is really not well developed. So it's like the reward and the reinforcement kind of helps out that part of the prefrontal lobe because it's something motivating to them. I mean, look, it's true with adults too. How many people have more, you know, have no problem watching TV shows they like or writing a report that's due the next day? You know, so yeah, not bribery. It's okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, thank you very much, everyone. I really appreciate your time, and thanks for those great questions. And I know that Stuart, Bella, and Esther are available to anyone who was on tonight and anyone who's listening. If you want to reach out to them directly for more ideas or for direct intervention, please absolutely do that. Thank you again, everybody. I'm going to end the meeting now and wish everyone a good night and remind everyone to be healthy, stay healthy, get outside, eat right, and do all those important things that we just heard on the call tonight. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night and early good Shabbos to everybody.
Shabbos.